A lot of people in this space, they're saying that the body keeps the score. My interpretation is that the body is not the place where it all gets stored, but it's in the mind-body matrix, which is the nervous system. So in the nervous system, it's almost as if an experience gets imprinted in the present moment when it really happened in the past. So when we can look at the memory from the past and we can see, okay, this is what happened, period. This is what wisdom is. This is what we can say, this is an experience that gives me knowledge and wisdom and information. But if we have emotional attachment to that, if we feel like because something is a memory that is so present in our present moment, in our consciousness, then, for example, when we walk down the street and we hear screeching of the tires, if we had a car accident and that's imprinted in the present moment, then this is going to be the memory that comes up on the surface. And our whole entire body reacts as if we're in danger in the moment where we're not.
Today's guest is Jakob Gricar, a trauma-informed somatic transformational coach and a spiritual entrepreneur focused on bringing people closer to their purpose. His journey began through overcoming an illness through spiritual practice at 13 and led to travel all over the world, going from homelessness to leading retreats and mentoring multi-six-figure CEOs. Multiple near-death experiences, becoming a yogi in India and living in the Amazon jungle with the indigenous plant medicine keepers. He is now working with world-renowned coaches, leading from pioneers in somatics and supporting dozens of people through his online containers. Welcome, Jakob.
Thank you for having me, Anita.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm so excited for this conversation. That's only a bit of your bio I've read out, but the rest of it is absolutely phenomenal, and I will be asking you questions on that. What is one of the most courageous things that you have done?
I think the most courageous thing that I've done is really allowing myself to be me and not worrying about what other people are thinking. And when I was a teenager, for me, that meant just dropping all the ideas of what my life should look like, all the pre-planned ways that people have decided how my life is going to go, and just doing my own thing and going on my own journey.
Wow, absolutely love it. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. So what took you on your journey of being a trauma-informed transformational coach? Is it from overcoming an illness and your spiritual practice at 13?
Yeah, so when I was 13, I was going through a chronic skin disease, and I read a book on hypnosis. I ended up delving deep into that and learning the basis of hypnosis. And I was thinking that is probably something that would help me. And in Slovenia, this is where I come from, we don't have access to a lot of resources and a lot of recorded material. So I went into library and I started learning everything I could about self-hypnosis. And I started recording my own self-hypnosis tapes to be able to go to sleep. And at about that time, I started learning about meditation. I was reading different books on spirituality. I started meditating for a few hours every single day. And in about 3 months, my skin disease went away, which was miraculous. And later on, I had a similar experience with my knee injury. So I come from a background of martial arts, and I was doing martial arts up until I was about 16 years old, at which point I had an injury of my knee. And of course, doctors told me I need an operation of meniscus and of tendons, and they told me that I will never compete again if I don't do that. And I just decided that I want to heal that just with the power of my own mind. So I started meditating again, got into different books, different teachers, really delved deep into the depths of myself. And in about 2 months, my leg started feeling quite normal. Right now, when I think about it, I don't even remember which leg the injury was on. So that shows you the power of the mind, right? But in that moment, I had all these ways of being that people told me that I should take on. So I should be an architect, I should study, I should go to university. I should get a job after. And all of this pressure of people's opinion of how my life should look like was what really ended up driving me to the point where I decided, like, saying no to
Yeah.
everything. And I left Slovenia and I started traveling the world when I was 18. And that's where I went from homelessness to being in different amazing experiences and having some of the darkest moments of my life as well. So eventually, what led me to the work that I'm doing right now was a lot of very big downs and a lot of very big ups.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, yeah, just talk us through that, from going from homelessness to leading retreats, mentoring multi six-figure CEOs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do believe that from the sense of spirituality and the soul,
Mm.
we crave different experiences that give us kind of like a jumping board to be able to step into who we're meant to be, right? And for me, I come from a background where there was there was poverty, there was scarcity, there was a lot of kind of like numbness, let's say, and a lot of just below average lifestyle, just below average things that we've had. And I have a sense that my soul was looking for experiences that were bigger to be able to serve the world better. So what started happening is I have put, either consciously or unconsciously, myself into some really tough situations. So I started working in marketing in Spain, in Barcelona, and the project just ended up failing, at least my part of
Mm.
it. And I ended up homeless in the streets of Budapest, literally without a place to be sometimes, and sometimes playing poker for money. And then started moving my way down through Italy to the south of France, living in the streets, sleeping in the streets, having a pretty tough life. And
Mm.
I remember the moments where it was the hardest were the moments that brought me into the deepest faith. So that
Mm.
was when I started seeing like the bigger purpose behind what was happening in those moments. So what I did is I started imagining myself being healthy. I started imagining myself being in different situations. I started imagining myself how my life could look like if it was going in the way that I would want it. And suddenly all these opportunities started coming into my life. As soon as I switched my perspective from the victim place, where it was like, why is this happening to me, to the space where I was thinking, how is this in service of life? How is this supporting life? And also stepping into bigger faith and allowing myself to feel like, wow, there is a plan that is beyond what I can imagine. So as I switched my mindset, all of these
Mm.
opportunities started coming into my life. And first it was a lot of hospitality jobs and managing different restaurants and cafes, working in different places. I actually spent a lot of time in UK as well. I know that you're from
Oh.
UK. And then in Australia, and then in India, which is where I eventually got into yoga. And I stayed in
Mm.
ashram with different yogis. I was there learning different traditions, from Ashtanga to Kundalini to Hatha yoga, and also like the practices that are far beyond what we consider in Western
Absolutely.
world as yoga, the physical movement, right? So that really had me thinking of what else is possible, and eventually that led me into moving to the Amazon and working with indigenous plant medicine keepers. So working with a lot of plant medicine and living with the native people of the Amazon. So I think these are the experiences that are so big and so diverse and so vast that really sparked the spark inside of me of what it is that I can give to the world and how can I contribute, how can I support.
Mm.
And as I kept on being in the space of service, of just giving, and I want to support, I want to serve, I want to lead retreats, I want to help people. And from that perspective, a lot of different people ended up entering my life. People that are struggling with addiction on one side of the spectrum, people who are struggling with depression, and on the other side of the spectrum, multi 6, 7 figure CEOs of bigger companies, people who are really deep on their path but want to deepen their level of spirituality. And then also, I started learning from the pioneers in somatics, like really going deep into my path of understanding the connection between the mind and the body and the nervous system, and how we store a lot of things inside of our bodies. And when that gets released, the freedom that comes through it as well.
That's fantastic. And that goes nicely on to my next question. Tell me in a bit more detail about the nervous system and the somatics.
Yeah, so a lot of people in this space, they're saying that the body keeps the score, right? So my interpretation is that the body is not the place where it all gets stored, but it's in the mind-body matrix, which is the nervous system. So in the nervous system, it's almost as if an experience gets imprinted in the present moment when it really happened in the past. So when we can look at the memory from the past and we can see, okay, this is what happened, period. This is what wisdom is. This is what we can say. This is an experience that gives me knowledge and wisdom and information. But if we have emotional attachment to that, if we feel like because something is a memory that is so present in our present moment, in our consciousness, then, for example, when we walk down the street and we hear screeching of the tires, if we had a car accident and that's imprinted in the present moment, then this is going to be the memory that comes up on the surface. And our whole entire body reacts as if we're in danger in the moment where we're not. So I'm making a really strong example with the screeching of the tire and a car accident, but that can be also really small things as well. So for example, if your parents didn't pick you up from school, or they forgot about taking care of you on your birthday, or something very simple, right? Something that we say it's not a big trauma, not a big traumatic experience, but that created a sense of abandonment that is normally still imprinted in the present moment. So when your partner is going to forget about something and say that he or she will do something and then they don't, then that immediately brings back that childlike danger, right? My parents forgot about me, I'm in danger. So I'm just using this to illustrate how things that have happened in the past need to stay in the past. If we bring them into the present through our nervous system, that's where we call it traumatic imprint. Some people call it trauma. I stay away from that because trauma is very much, by definition, held to a lot of bigger events like sexual, physical abuse, to car accidents and natural disasters. But there's also like these little things that happen over and over again, like the accumulative process. There's also like just the sense of feeling abandoned or not cared for, which creates the injunctions in the mind. And then through those injunctions, we live our entire life. So the role of the nervous system in this is, if we can keep ourselves in the space where we can come back to regulation, and this is where I want to make a distinction as well. It's not about being regulated all the time. It's about the plasticity. So if we can come back to the space where we can regulate ourselves when things are moving, when things are going in a challenging way, where we're asked to be expanded, and we can come back to the space of regulation, this is where our nervous system is really healthy. And for a lot of people, when they learn the space of chaos and they learn the space of dysregulation, then they find the evidence for that in every single thing that they do. So, for example, you get an email from your boss and it starts creating dysregulation inside of you. And majority of the people in this era, they spend most of their time in the space of activation and dysregulation, right? The news are wired to support that. The media is wired to support that. Our jobs are wired to support that. It's all the technology that makes us feel like we're actually in danger, where really we're not.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love the way you explained that. Thank you for doing that and your examples as well. So tell me more about what is somatics to ontology coaching. Tell me more about that and what that means, please, Jakob.
Yeah, so somatics are when we go into the process of healing parts of ourselves through the portal of the body. So as I was sharing in the previous question, when we can really go into the body and work things out at the level of the body and at the nervous system, that's where we really pull the weeds out with the roots instead of just cutting the tops. And I see oftentimes a lot of people that I work with, they've done talk therapy for many, many years, and they're saying that the session in somatics takes them much deeper than that. So we've had dozens of people come through our containers, and that's one of the reflections we get the most. It's like talk therapy on steroids, right? But the thing is, the talk therapy can only work at the level of the mind. So it can work at the level of the prefrontal and neocortex, the thinking mind. Whereas somatics, they get to the level of the body, the nervous system, which is the limbic and the reptilian brain as well. So when we can pull things out at that place, then that's where they actually stop. because you can try to think your way out of everything, but if it's stuck and stored in your nervous system, it's just not going to move. And we can see that often in the space of personal development with affirmations, for example. People will look at the mirror and like repeat the affirmations. I'm worthy, I'm enough, I love myself, I'm a multimillionaire, I create massive businesses. But your body doesn't take it in. Your subconscious mind doesn't take it in, because there's a huge dissonance between where you're actually at versus what you're saying. So just saying, talking things out can be really helpful, but oftentimes it's missing a core component of the nervous system in the body. So this is what somatics are. And ontology is the science of being. It's looking at why we do what we do and looking at everything that is happening outside of us as a reflection of what is happening inside of us. So this is taking full agency and ownership over all parts of our lives and our existence. As an example, if somebody is coming to an ontological coach wanting to fix their job, the ontological coach would always bring them back to themselves. Like, how is this reflection? How is what is not working in your job a reflection of what is not working inside of you?
Absolutely. I love that. And I love your analogy of not just cutting the grass on top, actually pulling out the weeds. I really love that. Thank you for sharing that. So, as we know, healing is so paramount, and if not, we'll be suffering. So, how can people realize that you really do need to heal?
It's a tricky question, because when we look at from the perspective of non-duality, we really don't. We're already whole. And something that as a somatic therapist and as a coach, I hold people in is the idea that they're already whole, and the process of working with them is just allowing them to come back to themselves and who they're meant to be. So it's a very subtle thing, because that can also become a bypass, right? So if people are always looking at the perspective of, I don't need to heal, I don't need to do any work, then there's the trick of really bypassing, like looking deeper at ourselves. But when we're already looking deeper at ourselves, there's an invitation to not look at ourselves as broken, but just to look at ourselves as everything is the opportunity to step into the next level. And that can be coming back into processing certain beliefs and where certain beliefs are coming from, or injunctions, or why we're doing things the way we're doing them, looking at our patterns, and then recognizing if something in your life is not working, the aspect of you is what is reflecting that. So I would say, how can somebody recognize that there's still work that needs to be done on themselves, would be, if your life is not looking the way it should look, then there's something that is off. Because when you're full vibrational match to the life that you want, everything matches, everything flows, everything looks exactly the same. I recognize that within myself as well, because a couple of years ago, I was looking at how my life was looking, and I was traveling all over the world. I was in different containers with really amazing people. I was in a relationship. I was having all of these things come up in my life, yet I wasn't having a lot of money and I wasn't having a lot of security. So I was looking at that and something was wrong, right? And I see that often when I mentor really big CEOs and really wealthy people. They've built a lot of different companies, but their relationships are messed up. Their health is messed up. They don't feel a sense of purpose. So if everything matches in your life, that's when you know that you're on a really good trajectory. That's when you know that vibrationally, you are really embodying where you're going. And if one area of your life is here and one area of your life is here, that normally tells me that you're just compensating through one to avoid dealing with the other. So how do you know that you need to improve a part of your life? Is just look at your life and see, is everything looking the way you want it to look?
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. How can one expand the capacity for wealth then?
I think when it comes to that, it's really looking at the nervous system and the level of the nervous system. So what I was sharing is, when you see that your life is matching, right? You know that your capacity is big to hold. If you see that you're having a lot of money, but you're not having good relationships, then you know that your capacity is limited. It's also when you look at how much you're making, for example, if we talk about wealth, it's looking where you actually start blocking yourself. And I can speak from my personal experience. I at some point hit the absolute maximum of how much I could earn in my nervous system, because I was told by my parents that we we're poor, we don't have money, we can't afford this, we can't buy this, we can't buy that. And it was just like something that I kept listening throughout my entire childhood. So when I started earning a certain amount of money, I started feeling unsafe because it was so unfamiliar. So all of these beliefs that I didn't even know were there started coming up on the surface and making me feel like actually making money is unsafe, right? So the same way we can talk about relationships. For people who have grown up in chaotic environments with parents arguing with each other, with a lot of abuse, when they get into a safe relationship, they might start feeling like this is unfamiliar, this is unsafe. So to expand the capacity to be able to hold for the things that we want is really learning to regulate and coming back to the space of regulation. So we have already been trained to deal with this regulation. Let's not do more of that. Instead, let's focus on how can we use our nervous system to create a life of joy, a life of peace, a life of fulfillment, instead of just learning how to be with more chaos. The goal of all of this trauma work is not to learn to be with more chaos, but it is so that we can hold more wealth, so that we can hold better relationships, so that we can have better connection with other people and with ourselves.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And I truly can understand that. Jakob, tell me more about your multiple near-death experiences. What happened there?
I think it comes back to my subconscious desire to create chaos. And when I look back at it now, the way I have lived my life for probably around 7 or 8 years after I've left my country, I would never repeat a lot of things that I've done. And I lived very recklessly. And when I was about 13, when I was dealing with my chronic illness, I went into the space that was really dark in my mental health, and it became a very depressive state where I would just question what is the meaning of life. And I feel like because of the depth of that darkness, I needed to create experiences that would make me feel alive. So what I started doing is I started learning how to ride a motorbike. I had my motorbike license when I was 18. Then I started skydiving. I learned how to skydive by myself without another person, without a tandem. And I did over 30 something jumps by myself.
Wow.
And it was just the desire to start feeling alive again. And I think for a lot of people, they're living in a space of dissociation without even really knowing it. For me, I was actually quite aware that I was dissociated, and I wanted to create big experiences that made me feel alive, even though I didn't understand that I could create them in a positive way. Right. And we can see that when I work with people, I can see that a lot of times it manifests as different abusive relationships for people. Right. But that person just made me feel alive, or different situations with work. So for me, I started traveling the world, as I've said. A lot of different things happen, and two of the things that stand out to me the most is one was in Vietnam. I bought a motorbike, and I was motorbiking throughout the country, and because of just my careless driving and my desire to feel alive, I would speed in front of different trucks. I would drive really, really quickly. And I had a motorbike accident where a truck went probably about 2 inches, like 10 centimeters or something, next to my head. And that really shook the life into my body, right? The second experience I had was when I was hitchhiking in Argentina. And again, I was in the space of like carelessness. I believe that everything works out for me, which it always does. And I sat in the wrong truck, and two truckers brought me up until the next town, and then they kept driving, and at some point they pulled out on the side of the highway. They drove a bit into the desert, and they pulled out knives, and they robbed me, and they left me in the middle of the desert. So that was one of those moments where I was like shaken up, realizing that I was just about to die, right? And as I was left in the desert, and made my way back. Hitchhiked actually my way to the next town because I didn't have anything anymore. And the whole experience that came out of that, it was really like bringing me into the moment of like, I need to change things in my life. I need to change my life. But it took a lot to brought me into that space. And humans are quite funny in this way because oftentimes we need to be brought down on our knees to actually start changing something instead of taking, subtle cues of the universe and of God and just listening of like, oh, my life is not working. Sometimes it takes like really big experiences and really big illnesses for us to wake up. So for me, those were those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you definitely shook up things there.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I realized as I got into the work with somatics and with trauma, how much of that was still stored in my body. I had a car accident when I was 18. I totaled my parents' car. And I took a lot of pride in how I reacted. I immediately got out of the car. I made sure that everyone was okay. I got everyone far away from the car in case anything would happen, called the ambulance, called the police, did all the paperwork, took people to the hospital. Nobody got hurt, lucky enough, but I really took a lot of pride in how quick on my feet I was. And it was only about a year ago I was working with my somatics teacher, and she started telling me about car accidents, and I started thinking, wow, I had a car accident too. And as I was being trained on how to facilitate the release from car accidents, she took me in a visualization, and I started visualizing it by myself and what happened to me and what would have happened if things would have gone the other way. And suddenly my entire body started shaking and convulsing. And I realized that unconsciously I've still held my upper trapezius, my shoulders, in a position of like holding the wheel, right? So all of these experiences that we have, even if we're not consciously aware of, in a way they get imprinted in our bodies and in our nervous system. And oftentimes you can just intuitively tell somewhat what happened to a person, because sometimes a lot of shoulders up and like holding tensely is people bracing themselves for impact, right? So that can be either like a car accident or something that's really quick, really fast, or physical abuse, or sometimes it's even like emotional abuse, right? And we just like try to contract to hold ourselves from it happening. So the body has so much wisdom and so much knowledge, and through that, it's where the real healing happens.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. I love that. Yes. Jacob, you built a retreat center in Guatemala. Tell me more about that, and it sounds interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So after I've left the Amazon, I had a lot of experience in facilitation, and I've learned how to facilitate different ceremonies, different practices, including started facilitating breathwork, and I got really into the science of it. So contrary to majority of the people who go to school to learn something, I went to the Amazon. I sat with plant medicine. I learned from the indigenous, and I went into the science of it and learning the technology of the mind, let's say, later. So as I started learning breathwork from the indigenous as well, and then coming back to the science of breathwork instead of the other way around, right? The same thing happens with people in yoga. They start learning about the body, they start learning about how the movement work and the anatomy, and then over time they often get into the spiritual parts of it. For me, it came from the spiritual parts. So the first interactions with yoga were in Southeast Asia, and then learning yoga in India, and really getting into the spirituality of it first, and then coming back to science, and then reading all the books on anatomy. And I read so much. I love to read. So for me, learning has been a really big thing. So as I left the Amazon, I started facilitating different experiences, including leading a lot of breathwork retreats, breathwork ceremonies. I started doing my own retreats, and I started my own retreat company in Mexico, leading experiences that were a little bit longer. And what I did is I noticed that in the psychedelic spaces, there's a lot of, let's say, immaturity. So there's a lot of people who go after certain medicines, and it has this grasping energy of like wanting more and like seeing that these experiences are going to be life-changing and needing to have more of them, and it kind of becomes like an ego thing as well. And in my opinion, it's just another layer of addiction for people. So what I started doing is I would bring psychotherapists and psychologists into the retreat settings where I would work with indigenous. So for example, taking a group down to Brazil, working with ayahuasca and bringing in psychotherapists to be there with us, supporting the experience while we're working with the indigenous in Brazil. So that's something that almost no one does, or no one that I knew at the time was
Wow.
doing. And that really got me into the space of like, wow, I love this world. I love the world of transformation. I love working with people. And when I moved to Guatemala, I stumbled upon a property that wasn't fully developed, and the owner had the vision of creating a retreat center. So he left the key to his house to me, and basically just told me that he's going to fund the entire project if I build a retreat center. So I worked with about 6 workers permanently, and then probably about 8 to 10 more while we were in the heavier part of the build. But we built one of the most beautiful retreat centers that I've ever seen, with yoga space overlooking the lake with the volcanoes. It's very picturesque,
Wow.
and with a lot of different cabins and accommodations, which was definitely one of the hardest things that I've ever done. First of all, managing the entire build, and then second of all, managing the entire back end of the retreat center. So seeing really how all of the logistics work. And then as soon as we finished building, there was a big retreat with, I think, around 40 participants that we led starting the next day. So that was quite an experience, and definitely pushed me to the edge of how much I'm able to do by myself.
Wow.
And eventually also led to burnout, which is a whole nother thing.
Oh gosh. Yes. Oh, it sounds beautiful. Yes, definitely. Jacob, you are the co-author of the book Radical Freedom. Let go of who you were and set your creative soul free. Tell me more about that, please.
So the book actually became a co-authored project with
Mm-hmm.
over 100 really incredible people, and it's directed and produced and published by my friend Jessica, who you can see on the front cover as well. And what she did is she brought some of the most amazing people that she knows all together into one co-creative project.
Mm-hmm.
So that became the book Radical Freedom. And within this book, everyone is asked to co-author a chapter on what the freedom means to them, including giving practical advice on how to get there. So like giving some sort of like a step-by-step process. So I found this project to be incredible because it's such a co-creation with many different minds, and it gives so many different perspectives. So if you get that book, I really invite you to just like think about your intention, think about what you're moving through, and then just open the book wherever you do, because each person offers a different level of wisdom that is so beneficial and so beautiful.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. Yeah. I'll put the link to the book as well as your website links in the show notes. So people, please, if you're interested in that, do go along and get it. You have given us so many tools, daily steps to anyone that wants to start rebuilding their life from trauma. What is your key takeaway, Jacob?
For me, something that I would really offer to people is it doesn't need to be too complex. You can just start doing whatever you know how to do. And there's so many different tools and practices that are really valuable. And if you're in the space where you are struggling, where you're going through something really hard and challenging, just ask yourself, what are the smallest things that you can do right now that will make the biggest difference? And then actually go out and do them. Now, oftentimes I see a lot of people needing to learn more and discover more and process more and read more books and go through more courses. I think the biggest thing that you can do for yourself is to find somebody who can support you through the process, or to just figure out what the first steps are and do it by yourself. Just start doing it. The process of starting the healing is normally what opens up another door and then another one in the ways that are unique to you. And each thing that you start doing will then lead you to a more vibrationally higher version of yourself, which then attracts a different tools and different ways of being, right? And it's just kind of like peeling back the layers of the onion. And that often takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of responsibility. So cheat code in that is to really just get somebody who has already done the work to support you in it, because it collapses time. So instead of going through a lot of trial and error and doing a lot of different things, you have somebody who can like literally look at you and say, hey, this is what I did in your case, here is how to do it. And it collapses all these years and years of trial and error and experience into one piece of advice that's personalized for you. So a key takeaway that I want to give to people would be, one, really finding somebody who can support you on this journey, and then two, start doing it. Stop trying to learn about it and just take some advice, some tools, and really move forwards with them.
Oh, thank you. I absolutely love that. That's beautiful. So where can the listeners find you online, your book? What's your website, Jakob?
On the 21st of October 2024, we're launching a container called Metamorphosis. You can find it on joinmetamorphosis.com and just book a call. It's the most in-depth somatic and ontology program online. And we really go through every single phase and stage of your life, looking at all different parts of you, everywhere from movements to nutrition to sleep to telling the truth and what does honor feel like in the body, what does it mean like to live the life of integrity, and all the way to living, looking at all different relationships, grievances, traumatic experiences, any substances ever taken. We take the most rigorous inventory you've ever seen or has ever been seen in an online space, mapping out all our traumas and mapping out all our relationships where we're still holding any resentments or guilt or any energy that is not pure. And then we go through the process of clearing all of that so that we can live a life of purpose, life of clarity, life of joy, and life of freedom. So you can find that on joinmetamorphosis.com. And my website is jakobgricar.com. So my first and last name.com. I'm sure we're going to link this one on the bottom as well. For the duration of the Metamorphosis container, I'm not taking on any more one-on-ones, but feel free to reach out to me either through my website or through my Instagram.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing your insightful wisdom and knowledge with us today and doing the work on yourself. By doing so, you have helped so many other people and made a difference. I'd really like to acknowledge you for that. Jakob Gricar.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for having me on here today.
It's been an absolute pleasure and thank you. I've learned so much from you today.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. So what is your definition of courage?
My definition of courage is doing whatever scares you despite of the fear being there. So in my field of what I'm doing, a lot of people are afraid to feel. A lot of people are afraid to be visible. A lot of people are afraid of making a lot of money. A lot of people are afraid of really beautiful relationships. So the courage is really going after that, despite of feeling the fear of failure, despite of feeling all these fears about it, and even the fear of fully feeling, right? So it's knowing what the fear is and acting despite of it.